Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Great Vocal Majority Podcast, your source for the conservative view on American politics and culture, and where the issues are discussed with goodwill, candor, and intelligence. And now, here's your host, Tony Cottaspati.
Thanks, Duke. This is Tony Cottaspati, and welcome to the Great Vocal Majority Podcast, Volume 72, that's entitled Presidents Obama and Trump, Similarities and Differences. Let's start with Barack Obama. To begin with, he's not really an American. Don't get excited. I don't mean to say that he was born in Kenya. I don't believe that. I'm referring to his life experiences. They are uniquely non-American. He's got almost nothing in common with Americans of any stripe. First of all, Obama's biracial but identifies as black, as everyone knows. But his life growing up has almost nothing in common with black Americans outside of his skin tone. Obama grew up as a, quote, red diaper baby, unquote. That is, his parents were either communists or radical socialists. He lived in Hawaii and Indonesia for much of his formative years, and when he lived in the continental United States from the age of 11 to 18, he was mentored by Frank Marshall Davis. Now, if you don't know who he is, Frank Marshall Davis was a man so dangerous, the FBI had him on a roundup list of Soviet sympathizing communist subversives. By contrast, Donald Trump grew up in an upper-middle-class Queens home of a New York State real estate developer. From all accounts, Trump had a more or less typical childhood. He was a bit brash and rebellious, enough for his parents to place him into a military academy. But unlike Obama, Trump was not surrounded by anti-American radicals into his adulthood. Ever since he was a public figure, Trump has always been outspoken as a critic of the failures of government to live up to most of its basic obligations. Prior to becoming president, Obama was also critical of government, but for other reasons. Obama believed government failed to assume enough obligations and thus spoke out strongly in favor of more activist government. In other words, Trump believed the government wasn't adequately fulfilling its obligations, the obligations it already assumed, whereas Obama wanted the government to assume new and more pervasive obligations that it had not yet taken up. Now, when assessing their capacity for sympathy or empathy, Obama was far more inclined to display it for people who aren't even Americans. He regularly blamed past and current policies of the United States for many of the world's problems, and on those occasions when he demonstrated empathy for Americans, it often took a divisive tone, as in, if I had a son, he would look like Trayvon, or if you have a business, you didn't build that. Trump was not apologetic to foreign audiences for past or current policies. Rather, if he was apologetic at all, it was to the American people for the failure of the political leadership that created those policies that were hurtful. Policies which often, as in the case of trade agreements, took its toll on working class and middle class families, their employment, and their incomes. Now, when speaking to foreign audiences, rather than apologize for American policy, Trump was bold. Some would say rude. He acted as an advocate for America, reminding our allies in no uncertain terms what America was doing for them and whether those allies were living up to their own obligations to us. This was such a radical departure from Obama, as well as previous presidents of both parties. It had to be jarring to these other national leaders. Now, the media elites are endlessly fascinated by both men in opposite ways. Obama's treatment was so mild that one news outlet, which covered his presidency with a note of skepticism, that is Fox News, was painted by the Obama administration as agenda-driven and anti-Obama. It's very hard to argue that the media didn't have a virtual love affair with Obama and his presidency. Both Obamas, Michelle Obama and Barack Obama, appeared regularly on entertainment programs and had one softball interview after another. Barack Obama was extremely sensitive to media criticism because he got it so rarely, and on those rare occasions that he got it, it really flustered him. Despite boasting of having the most open and transparent administration in history, Obama hid more from the media than any president since the founding, arguably. There were more Freedom of Information Act requests that were denied or delayed under Obama. More whistleblowers, leakers, journalists who were surveilled or jailed under Obama. Maybe Obama was treated by the media with great deference, but he never returned the favor. Still, in aggregate, the media really adored him. The contrast with the media treatment of Donald Trump is painful. It's 180 degrees opposite of Obama's. Now, certainly, Trump's behavior in office can fairly be said to have accounted for some of this difference. But Trump is, let's face it, given to exaggeration, embellishment, misstatements, and untruthful comments in the same way as just about every other politician ever has been. For his entire public life, however, Trump has been known to speak in superlatives much in the same manner as a pitchman. And this is where the news media begins to show its disdain for Trump. When Trump was elected, the economy responded positively almost immediately. Obama and Clinton supporting economists such as Paul Krugman and Steve Ratner had predicted the economy would crash and never recover. The news media immediately leaped to credit Obama for the economic turnaround, despite failing to point out any policy that may have happened to account for it. What should have been obvious to any impartial observer was that the country just elected the most vociferously pro-business president in its history. Obama and his presumed successor, Hillary Clinton, could never be characterized as pro-business. That anticipated change in direction is what accounts for the immediate turnaround in both markets and major economic indicators. The problem was the news media really took it on the chin with the Trump victory and were staggered by it. They lost face and continue to lose face because the videos of them dismissing Donald Trump as a potential president, laughing at his candidacy, will live on forever. And since his election, the same media outlets who thought Trump's candidacy was a joke are now treating his presidency as if it were a crime. Their treatment of Trump is driven by much by an attempt to recover a loss of reputation as it is a partisan politics. For consider this, if the situation were reversed, let's say Trump was the heavy favorite and Hillary Clinton won in a surprise, it's hard to imagine the media reacting to the win quite the same way they have with Trump. Some in the Washington, D.C. media elites were perpetually perplexed and bewildered by Obama's behavior in office, judging him by a standard of governing set by his predecessors, which Obama clearly rejected. Obama sensed that a vast part of the media was willing to give him broad latitude. This enabled him to exceed his constitutional guardrails without consequence from the Congress and outside of Fox News, scarcely a whisper of protest in the media. Obama overrode his authority with the war powers that the president has by bombing more countries than any president since the Second World War. He rewrote black-letter law no less than 36 times with Obamacare. He exceeded his authority with the DACA executive order and on many other occasions. Now, all while doing this, especially during his first term, the media kept waiting for Obama to track to the middle. He never did, because he's not a centrist, any more than Joe Stalin was a centrist compared to Leon Trotsky. Obama came to office promising change, and he did it by growing government, making it more activist, more centralized, far more powerful over the lives of average Americans than ever before. Now, Donald Trump also confounds the Washington elites, but in a different way. Obama was there to drive change by empowering central planners in Washington, which he did. Trump was elected to do precisely the opposite, disrupt their power. From the very start, Trump sought to pull back on the reins of centralized Washington's power structure. He sought to accomplish this by eliminating regulations. Regulations are how the permanent government, in other words, the federal bureaucracies, exert their control over our way of life. This is not to say that all regulations are bad or that we should live in a regulation-free environment. I mean, of course, that would be ideal, but it's impractical. To Trump's way of thinking, regulations are a last resort, not the first option. Obama and the central planners suffer from a fatal conceit that regulations are always needed and it's always better to err on the side of having more than having less. They also believe that they can account for every possible human interaction in an economy centrally, which is the fatal conceit. The Obama approach to regulatory authority has led to bureaucratic abuses, which have resulted in nearly 24 unanimous Supreme Court decisions against the Obama administration, striking down such abuses. Barack Obama and Donald Trump may be diametrically opposites on the political spectrum. Their treatment by the media may be as different as black is from white, but they are similar in ways as well. Both are change agents, but for different visions of America. The Obama vision for America is one of a very left socialist agenda. His idea of America would demand less individual liberty. Obama's view is that of what some people might refer to as radical egalitarianism, where outcomes are determined ahead of time by your group and the identity you have within that group. As a leftist, Obama sees Americans as a collection of tribes. When it comes to race, the white tribe, the black tribe, the Asian tribe, the Latino tribe, the Native American tribe, and on and on. Now, this tribal view exists in all areas of life. I mean, there are economic tribes, rich and poor, and everything in between. There's religious tribes of all different religious types, and sexual orientation tribes. Obama sees history as having a pre-existing condition advantaging a minority over a majority, necessitating government prescriptions to correct it. There's only one problem, though. The fact is that these prescriptions have been tried elsewhere and have all failed miserably, but that doesn't seem to dissuade the committed leftist at all, and that's Obama. The Trump vision for America is quite different. Trump rejects the division of Americans along tribal lines. He believes that the most of the problems in the country have been caused by policies that don't accomplish what they were ostensibly set out to do. In other words, government has made itself the problem. In Trump's view, the best thing government can do is to first get out of the way of the people. This is manifested through reducing taxes and regulations, renegotiating trade agreements, and holding allies and foes accountable while securing national borders. Trump seems to believe in America to a greater degree than Obama. Obama has been accused, and probably rightly so, of believing in the managed decline of the United States. Trump believes if America leveraged all of our assets, all of our natural resources in the right way, the United States would remain the world's leading economy, technological and military power, well into the foreseeable future and beyond. And there does seem to be much evidence, especially recently, proving him to be right. What is the moral of this story? Well, I think it's simple. Donald Trump really does believe in America and the American people. He sees this country as the greatest and most unique country in all of human history. He is an American exceptionalist. Barack Obama, on the other hand, believes in his ideology more than he believes in America or the Constitution or any of it. He doesn't hate America, But he doesn't love it either. He sees us as having a largely unearned reputation with power, wealth, and influence greater than we ought to have. In other words, Obama's a globalist. So that is really what all this Trump bashing is all about. Much of the DC establishment is about the international left pushing for a globalist agenda, well, where at the end of it, the United States will look a whole lot more like the USSR than it does today, or communist China. And to the average person, it will affect the way you live, where you want to live, how you want to live. Should it ever happen? The question is, will Americans let it happen? For the Great Vocal Majority, I'm Tony Contespati. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel or to the podcast so you can get notices whenever there's a new podcast available. Thanks for listening.